everybody. We are talking today about the scientific process. So the last couple of weeks, we have been talking about diversity of life. So we've been talking about what makes something living. So how does a scientist know if something is living versus non-living? We've been talking about kingdoms and how once a scientist actually confirms, like, yes, this is a living thing, how do they classify organisms based on similarities, and how do they put organisms into different kingdoms? We're obviously still going to be talking about animals and bacteria and plants throughout the whole year, but we're kind of moving on from that a little bit, and we are talking today about how scientists actually do science. So this is something that we're going to be working on over the next few weeks because it kind of takes us a little bit of time to understand how the whole process works. And we are starting today with I'm going to kind of give you just a very brief overview, and then I'm going to talk about the first couple of steps. So that's what we're working on today. When I learned about how science was done, even when I was first a teacher, which was kind of a long time ago, this is how we taught the scientific process. It was linear, meaning there was a beginning and there was an end. So it started with observing and wondering, making a question, developing a hypothesis, planning, testing, gathering your data, and then figuring out what that data meant, and then you would get a conclusion. And it was very, you start here and you end here. What we found out from actually working with some scientists at the University of Minnesota is that's really not how science is done. We found this out about 8 years ago or so when we invited some actual scientists from the University of Minnesota to come into our classrooms and run some experiments with plants. And they asked us, they said, well, how are you teaching the scientific method or how science is done? And we showed them this lovely little process here, and they kind of shook their heads and were like, that's not how science is really done. And so they told us, well, science is done kind of like this, which is very similar, but there is a little bit of a difference. They called this the wheel of inquiry, and it's more of a cycle. And so it starts out right up here. You observe and you wonder, and you again, the steps are the same, but if you make a mistake or if something doesn't go right in your experiment, it is not a complete failure. And that's where this reflect and rethink part is different than the linear model. So you reflect, you rethink, maybe you change some things, and you can pop right back out to where you were in your experiment. It does not mean that you have to start all the way over again, which is super, super cool. We had a situation happen a couple of years ago where the scientists came in and we were running an experiment on plants, specifically geraniums. Know what those are. But anyways, we had done some research and we had found that this certain type of plant kind of likes to have more of an acidic type of soil or watering solution. And so we thought, well, what a great thing to test. And so we had given some of our plants just regular old water. We had given some of our plants like a coffee type of water that had a little bit of coffee added to it because that actually makes the soil acidic. Coffee is acidic. It's one of the reasons why it kind of isn't very good for your teeth if you drink a lot of coffee, which is not good for Miss Swanson because she drinks a lot. So we wanted to test that. We wanted to see if giving it coffee was going to make the plant actually grow more. And then the opposite of coffee in terms of acidity is a soapy solution mixed with water. So we had those three things. We had coffee, water, and a soapy water. And so we did all the things we were supposed to do, right? We came up with a question, we developed our hypothesis, and again, this was a whole 7th grade wide experiment. And in the middle of planning and testing, I walked into my room one day and literally I thought someone had died in my room. I thought that someone was hid some sort of dead animal somewhere in my room and was playing a joke on me. My classroom smelled so bad. There's no words to describe how horrible my classroom smelled. And what we ended up finding out over the next couple of days was that the plants that were watered with the soapy water were actually rotting because the soap was deteriorating their roots, and it was terrible. So with the teachers and the scientists, we came together and we reflected and we rethought a little bit. And we actually did some research, and the soap that we were using was not the right soap to use. And so we had to switch our soap. Now, in this linear model here, we would have had to start all the way over again. Our whole experiment, everything that we had done would have been kind of a flop, a failure. But all we had to do was switch the soap, and we were able to pop right back out here again and complete our experiment. So that's part of the cool thing about this lovely little wheel, is that even if you make a mistake, even if you have to change something, you're not completely throwing away all of the stuff that you worked so hard with. So, and this is actually, like I said, this is how science is done in the real world. So we're going to start out at the top here, and we're going to kind of start to walk through each of these steps. And we are going to start today with observing and wondering. So like I said, this is the very first step, and this is something that a scientist does. So an experiment usually begins when a scientist observes something and wonders why. I always like to say to kids that if you're going to run an experiment, it has to be something that you have a natural curiosity for. It's no fun to run an experiment on something that you don't really care about, or that you don't want to actually know the reason why something is happening. So why is this happening? Why did this happen? Why does this happen? Why are whatever? So you kind of start to think about those things, and usually that takes making some observations. So this weekend I had kind of a fun little thing happen to me. So watch this little video clip as I go through what happened and what I kind of started to make some observations on. So my lovely little daughter here has been asking for a tortoise for, I want to say 2 years, almost 3 years. She's obsessed with reptiles, like obsessed. And I thought it was just going to be a phase. You know how some kids go through, remember your horse phase? Mm-hmm. Well, whatever. Kids go through phases, right? And I didn't want to buy her a tortoise when she wasn't going to actually like it, because these things live for like 50 years. Anyways, this weekend, this was one of my roses. Ah! And, oh, is he eating? He's just laying his food dish. We got Anne a tortoise. So, today, I'm gonna move this a little bit towards here. Oh gosh, can you see? I don't think you can even see. Anyways, so today, as I was working from home, I thought, you know what? I'm gonna have lunch with little Timmy. His name is Timmy the tortoise. Timmy Johnny Swanson.
With a G.
Johnny with a G. Abe was able to, Abe named, my little guy, named the middle name, and it's Johnny, but it's with a G.
Johnny
Whatever.
G.
But I thought, because I'm super cool, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have lunch today with Timmy the tortoise. So I'm sitting up here and I'm just watching Timmy and I'm observing Timmy, and him and I have literally, we're eating like the same thing. He's got a salad, I had a salad for lunch, and I'm just kind of observing him and wondering things about him. And one of the things that we have been noticing the last couple of days is Timmy does this little weird head bob, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, he does this weird little head bob when we're present. And I was wondering, like, what is the cause of that? Why does he do that? Is it something that is it a sign to show that he's scared? Is it a sign to show that he's into something? We don't really know, right? We'd have to research that. What are some other things that we have learned about Timmy? Timmy is kind of shy. What does Timmy like to do?
Timmy likes to hide in the corner and dig.
He does. He likes to dig. He likes to hide. I will say, I came in here today and I was super quiet and I turned on some music.
He likes music.
Well, we don't know if he likes music, but again, the little head bobs, right? As Timmy was listening to some heavy rock music. All right, so Timmy is an interesting little creature, right? And we're still getting to know Timmy. Timmy's still getting to know us, but I made quite a bit of different observations over the last couple of days about Timmy. And I've been thinking, how could I turn my observations, my questions, my wonderings into an actual scientific experiment? And that's the next step in this wheel of inquiry is after we've made some observations and after we've asked ourselves some kind of I wonder statements, then we move on to a question. And this is something that's super important in that we have to make sure that our question is actually something that we can run an experiment on and get actual scientific results. So here we go. We are going to look at how we actually create a good, testable scientific question. One of the things when we think about a question in science, we want to make sure not only is it testable, like can I actually collect data on it, but is it repeatable? Meaning if someone else wanted to run my entire experiment over again, could they actually do that successfully? So a good question also avoids opinions and really focuses on facts and data that can be collected. So if we look at lovely little Timmy here, what kinds of questions from the observations that I made could we investigate with Timmy? So we're going to go through a couple example questions and we're going to think about, okay, is this something that's testable? Is this something that I could run an investigation on and get good results? Or maybe not. So we like to ask ourselves these questions when we are thinking about whether or not a scientific question is a good one. Can I just look the answer up? Can I just Google it? Do I need to run an experiment on it? Do I need to waste my time and money? Or can I just type it into Google and be like, whew, got the answer, I'm done. Is it just too hard for me to figure out? Is this above my skill level, both in terms of, am I able to actually figure this out? Or is it something that I can't afford? I don't have the materials and it's just not possible. Or again, is it something that I could actually do? Is it a legitimate testable question where I can actually get data on? So my first question here is what type of music does Timmy the tortoise like the best? Again, is it testable? Can I collect data on it? What type of music does Timmy the tortoise like the best? Oh, that's not testable. That's not something I can gather data on. I can't talk to Timmy as much as I would want to be able to have a lovely little conversation with Timmy. I can't do that. He's a tortoise. I'm a human. We can't communicate. This word here, best, again, is an opinion. My idea of best and your idea of best is going to be different. And so we want to, when we're making a scientific question, we want to avoid those kinds of things, those kind of words like best, greatest, which one do you like the most? Those kinds of things. They're not really measurable. We can take those and maybe rephrase them a little bit, but as this question is, it's not a good scientific question. Let's look at the next one. How does the temperature affect how many pellets of food Timmy eats per day? So I found this out. I thought I could just give little Timmy a salad every day. Well, that's not good enough. You gotta give these tortoises these little pellets that look like little poop. They're not poop. They're condensed vitamins and salad and grain. I don't even know what the heck they are, but they're good for the little tortoise. And so one of the questions we were asking, Anne and I were talking about is, well, how many pellets is he going to eat a day? And we know too that tortoises and reptiles, how they process food depends on temperature and sunlight. And so our question again is, how does temperature affect how many pellets of food Timmy eats per day? Is that something that I could test? Could I change the temperature of the tank, super hot, kind of in the middle, and cold? And could I count how many pellets Timmy eats? Yeah, I totally could do that. That's something that I could gather data on, and it's relatable to Timmy, and it's relatable to tortoises. That's definitely something that could be an experiment on how temperature affects how much pellets he eats, or how many pellets he eats. How about this one? Does the type of music affect how many head bobs he makes? Again, I don't know if you saw in the video, but he kind of does this cool little thing where he bobs his head. I don't really know what that is. I think it's something like Get Away From Me. But if I were to play different types of music next to his terrarium, or kind of aquarium looking thing, is that going to affect how many head bobs he makes? If I play classical music, is that going to cause his head bobs to be more or less? Or if I play rock music, is that going to, I could count how many head bobs that that lovely little tortoise makes. So this definitely is a testable question. Is it the greatest question in the world? No, but I've got something here I can change, and I've got something here I can measure and collect data on. How about this one? Why does Timmy hate Abe? I'll tell you, he does. Timmy does not like my little Abe, my little 4-year-old. He does not like him. Whenever Abe comes around, Abe's kind of rough with him. So he kind of ducks into his shell and gets kind of scared. Is this a testable question? Like, what can I collect data on? It's just not. I mean, is it a good question? Yeah. I mean, and I can kind of tell you he doesn't like him because he's rough with him, but there's no numerical, there's nothing I can measure, there's no numbers I can collect the way that this question is phrased. So that's not really a testable question. What about this one? What are tortoise eggshells made of? Anne and I were having this conversation. She said, well, Mom, if I get like a female tortoise and I've got Timmy, maybe we'll have tortoise babies, little hatchlings, and we can like start a tortoise farm. And it's like, calm down, Anne, we're not going to do that. But she goes, well, what are eggshells made of? That's a great question. Is it something that I could run an experiment on? No, I could just Google that. That's a great question, but I don't have to run an experiment and collect data on tortoise eggshells to find the answer. Someone at some point in history already did that. So that would be something that I could simply just Google and find the answer to. I don't have to actually create an experiment to find the answer to that. So let's say out of all of the different observations that we make and different questions we come up with, let's say we decide to test this. How does temperature affect how many pellets of food Timmy eats per day? Okay. Once we have decided on a question, we've double checked to make sure it's testable. We've double checked to make sure that we can collect data on it. Now is a good time where we would like to run some background information. And the reason we do this is because first off, it's always good to have background information. And second, it says it can also help you find out if you can find the answer just by doing research or learning about some similar experiments that have been conducted before. So I might actually do some research about this, and I might find that, low temperatures make the tortoise not really eat a lot. So I could use that not only to maybe answer my question, but I could use that as a way to develop my hypothesis, what I think is going to happen. So any type of ways that we can gather more information and do research is going to only help our experiment. So again, what would I want to know before really diving into this experiment about how temperature affects how many pellets he eats? I want to know what temperature, the effective temperature on reptiles. Why is it important that I have like a basking light and temperature, high temperatures in his cage? What is in these weird little poop looking pellets? Like, why are they important? What kinds of things do they have that maybe are good for the tortoise? So all of those kinds of things are going to be helpful. Or even just like researching in general about Russian tortoises. If you're going to run an experiment on a specific type of animal, you probably should know a little bit about that specific animal. So all of those things are super important when we are starting the process of trying to figure out what our investigation is going to look like. So again, that's all we're going to talk about for today. Again, this wheel is super, 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 super important. And we're going to continue on learning about how to investigate different questions and how to write a good question tomorrow. I relate to you so much. Look at that. He fell asleep. Is he asleep? Eating?
I think. No, he's awake. He's awake.
Like, that is me right there.